Hi, everybody. Turn to Genesis 42. Last week, we watched how Joseph was finally released from his time of captivity in Egypt in circumstances that only God could orchestrate, because outside of that, they make absolutely no sense whatsoever. And he had faced several injustices, primarily at the hands of his brothers, hands of Potiphar's wife, and forgotten by a man who could have helped him, could have encouraged him. And now he sits as the royal vizier, the second in command in the whole land of Egypt. He is second only to Pharaoh, and to the point where Pharaoh says, I'm above you only in the throne. That's it. The only difference is I sit on a throne and you don't. Has his signet ring, which means he has all the authority of Egypt and Pharaoh behind him and can wield it as he wills. So this incredible reversal that happens in Joseph's life. And now we come to the culmination of the story. All that's been good, but now we get to see him reconnecting with the brothers. You know, the brothers who wanted to kill him and then sold him into slavery instead. Those guys are now going to come back into the scene, and we get to see how Joseph responds to them in that moment and how he makes us all look really bad because he responds so well, mostly. There's some fun stuff in there that we'll look at. And what ended up the ultimate purpose of all that's happened with Joseph's life, we get a picture of that as well. And we're going to look at a bunch of large chunks of scripture today. So, we'll read some of those large chunks, but then we're also going to be kind of skipping around and catching the highlights a bit. So I hope that over the course of maybe the rest of this week, read all of these chapters in depth. Look at all the intricate details of what happens over the course of this arc of the story. So let's start in Genesis 42, verse 1. Now Jacob saw that there was grain in Egypt. Remember, there's 7 years of the plenty. That's now past, and we're a couple of years into the famine. So things are already getting bad, but Egypt has grain. No one else has it. Egypt has it. Why? Because of Joseph. That's why. And Jacob said to his sons, why are you staring at one another? Sounds like a dad for you. Get up and do something, lazy. Then he said, behold, I've heard that there is grain in Egypt. Go down there and buy some for us from there so that we may live and not die. So 10 brothers of Joseph went down to buy grain from Egypt. But Jacob did not send Joseph's brother Benjamin with his brothers, for he said, lest any harm befall him. So the sons of Israel came to buy grain among those who were coming, for the famine was in the land of Canaan also. Now Joseph was the one in power over the land. He was the one who sold to all the people of the land. And Joseph's brothers came and bowed down to him with their faces to the ground. And Joseph saw his brothers and recognized him. But he disguised himself to them and spoke to them harshly. And he said to them, where have you come from? They said, from the land of Canaan to buy food. But Joseph recognized his brothers, although they did not recognize him. And Joseph remembered the dreams which he had had about them and said to them, you are spies. You've come to look at the nakedness of the land. And they said to him, no, my lord, but your servants have come to buy food. We are all sons of one man. We are honest men, liars. Your servants are not spies. And he said to them, no, but you've come to look at the nakedness of our land. So they said, your servants are 12 brothers in all, the sons of one man in the land of Canaan. Behold, the youngest is with our father today, and one is no more. And Joseph said to them, it is as I said to you, you are spies. By this you'll be tested, by the life of Pharaoh. You shall not go from this place unless your youngest brother comes here. Send one of you that he may get your brother while you remain confined, that your words may be tested, whether there is truth in you. But if not, by the life of Pharaoh, surely you are spies. Then he put them all together in prison for 3 days. And Joseph said to them on the third day, do this and live, for I fear God. If you are honest men, let one of your brothers be confined in your prison. But as for the rest of you, go, bring grain for the famine of your households, and bring your youngest brother to me, so your words may be proven true and you will not die. Then they did so. And they said to one another, surely we are guilty concerning our brother, because we saw the distress of his soul when he begged us, yet we would not listen. Therefore this distress has come upon us. And Reuben answered them, saying, did I not tell you, saying, do not sin against the boy, yet you would not listen? So also his blood, behold, is required of us. Now they did not know that Joseph was listening, for there was an interpreter between them. And he turned away from them and wept. Then he returned to them and spoke to them, and he took Simeon from them and bound him before their eyes. Then Joseph gave a command to fill their bags with grain and to restore every man's money in his sack and to give them provisions for the journey. And thus it was done for them. What a fun little account. And it's going to get more fun the more we read it. So Jacob, Israel, hears, hey, they have food in Egypt. Everywhere there's a famine. In the known worlds, we don't have food. Go to Egypt and buy the grain so that we'll live and not die. So they send 10 brothers. He keeps Benjamin back, the youngest. Why does he keep Benjamin back?
He didn't want him harmed.
Why doesn't he want him harmed? He sends the other ones for the sake of his name. It's his wife's favorite. Remember, he loved Rachel more than Leah. Rachel had 2 babies. Joseph, who's now in his eyes dead, and Benjamin. She died in childbirth with Benjamin. So he's holding back yet another favored son. It hasn't worked out any time to show favoritism. But he holds back the youngest, holds back the sons of his favorite wife, and the rest can go to Egypt. We'll risk you. It's fine. And they go. Joseph's in charge. They don't recognize him. He's going to be dressed like an Egyptian. He's going to have makeup on. The Egyptians were known for wearing elaborate makeup. He's got the clothes on. They're not expecting to see him. They're not thinking about him and wondering if they're going to run into him. They don't know what happened to him. They assume he's dead. In fact, they describe him as no more. He's gone. So they're not even thinking about that. Joseph, however, knows exactly who they are. And understandably so. They're the brothers. They're the ones who sold me into slavery. And there's this interesting power dynamic that happens. Joseph's in power. The brothers come, and how do they approach Joseph? They bow with their faces to the ground. Now, let's remind ourselves, what was it that Joseph dreamed when he was 17? All of his brothers would bow with their faces to the ground to him. And now it happens. The dream has been fulfilled after 13 years. The brothers come face first before his presence, and the text even tells us, and he remembers the dreams. Oh yeah, I dreamt this twice, that they would bow before me, and now they have. God can fulfill those dreams decades later. He's not concerned about timing at all. He knows all of how this is going to go down. Again, they don't recognize Joseph. Joseph recognized them, treats them like strangers, and speaks to them harshly. So would you. So would I. I would have had fun with it. Joseph has some fun with them. Yep, that's the playbook. That's what you do. So he accuses them of being spies. You're coming to check out the, quote, nakedness of the land. That's what happens in a famine. Nothing grows. So there's no crops. It's only the grain that's been stored. That's why you're here. Oh, no, that's not why we're here. Yes, you are. No, it's not. Yes, it is. And then back and forth. And they tell about the family. We're all the sons of one man in Canaan, Israel, that will eventually become the nation of Israel. And 10 of us are here. Youngest is back. One is no more. And he knows they're telling the truth. He is the one who is no more. He knows exactly what they're saying and that it's accurate. And there's this, again, interesting dynamic. They can't understand him. He's speaking Egyptian. There's an interpreter. But he hasn't forgotten Hebrew. He can understand them. So it's a fun game. So as they're talking to one another, I mean, what do they acknowledge as they're talking to one another? Why is this happening? Yes, this is This is what happens when you kill your brother. God is holding his blood against us. We deserve this because of what we did to him. And they are correct. That is exactly what they deserve. They all deserve to die for what they did to their brother. Joseph gets choked up, goes away from their presence. He weeps because the harm that's been placed on him and all the stuff he's had to endure for the last 13, 14, 15 years, he's had to deal with the consequences of their evil. Then he weeps and he comes back once he, fixes his eyeliner and gets them all squared away. He proposes. Here's how this is going to go. You're going to go to jail. 3 days, they go to jail, and then he has a plan. I'm going to let you go. We're going to leave one behind. And you're going to go get the youngest, and you're going to bring him here. I want to know that you're telling the truth. Now, he knows they're telling the truth. He wants to see his brother. That's his only blood brother. Go and get him and bring him here. So Simeon stays back. Again, there's some really cool imagery coming. Simeon stays back in prison while the rest go. And Joseph totally sets them up. Puts all the grain that they have asked for and gives instructions for all the money that they used to buy the grain. He gives it back to them. Hides it in their bags that they've brought with them to carry the grain. A seemingly insignificant detail, it becomes quite significant. So they part ways. Simeon's in prison until they get back. Now remember, they're not using airplanes. They're not using cars. They're walking. We're talking months and months of travel back and forth. So he's not sitting in prison for a few days. He's settling in for the long term now in this prison. And this is what Joseph has done to him. And here's what goes down on the way. Chapter 42, verse 26. So they loaded their donkeys with their grain and went from there. And then one of them opened his sack to give his donkey fodder at the lodging place, and he saw his money. And behold, it was in the mouth of his sack. So he said to his brothers, my money has been returned, and behold, it's even in there, in my sack. And their hearts sank, and they turned trembling to one another. What is this that God has done to us? What an interesting phrase. Not Joseph or whoever this official is. What is this that God has done to us? Then they came to their father Jacob in the land of Canaan and told him all that happened to them, saying, the man, the Lord of the land, spoke harshly with us and took us for spies of the country. So he just said, we're honest men, we're not spies. We're 12 brothers, sons of our father. One is no more. The youngest is with our father today in the land of Canaan. Then the man, the Lord of the land, said to us, by this I will know that you are honest men. Leave one of your brothers with me and take grain for the famine of your households and go. But bring your youngest brother to me that I may know that you're not spies, but honest men. I will give your brother to you and you may trade in the land. Now it happened that they were emptying their sacks, and behold, every man's bundle of money was in his sack. And they and their father saw their bundles of money, and they feared. And their father Jacob said to them, you've bereaved me of my children. Joseph is no more, and Simeon is no more, and you would take Benjamin. All these things are against me. And then Reuben, the oldest, spoke to his father, saying, you may put my 2 sons to death if I do not bring him back to you, which stinks to be one of Reuben's kids. Put him in my hand, and I will return him to you. But Jacob said, my son shall not go down with you, for his brother is dead, and he alone remains. If harm should befall him on the journey on which you're going, then he will bring my gray hair down to Sheol in sorrow. So he says no, thus leaving one of his other sons to rot in prison. So from here, we're going to compress the storyline a bit to continue through the account. The brothers journey back, all this goes down, and everyone is acknowledging God's hand in all the affairs of what's happening. God is doing this. What has God done? We don't know what's happening here. And their consciences, all these years later, are still guilty for what they did to Joseph, and understandably so. They recount everything that's been happening, and absolutely not. Benjamin will not go. His brother is, now they're all brothers, but his full brother is dead. and you're not going to take. Again, this is a several-month journey. So it's too dangerous. The answer is no. Chapter 43, after some time goes by, food's running out and desperation kicks in. Jacob, again, who's referred to Israel in the chapter, asks his sons to go back to Egypt and get more food. Judah objects, saying, if we go, we can only go if Benjamin goes. That man was clear. The Lord of the land, he refers to him twice. He is clear. If we do not come back with Benjamin, he's going to label us spies. We're going to be in prison, or they're going to execute us. So Israel finally agrees, because when you're starving, you'll do desperate things. And they send many gifts to this Egyptian lord of the land. Look at chapter 43, verse 14. Here's what Jacob says. He's just told him, you can take Benjamin. Verse 14, and may God Almighty grant you compassion before the man, so that he will release you, your other brother, and Benjamin. And as for me, if I am bereaved of my children, I am bereaved. Go, take him, get the food, and if kids die, they die. Again, this is throwing your hands up. It's this or we all die because of starvation. But again, he acknowledges who's going to be responsible for this meeting going well for the Lord of the land. God would be responsible for that. Let's ask God, the God of compassion, to orchestrate this to make it go well with you. The 10 brothers arrive in Egypt, and they're taken into Joseph's house. They believe they're going to be enslaved. But the unimaginable happens. Simeon is brought out of the prison and is brought in to join them. And the steward tells them, God has blessed you. He's the one who gave your money back. It's okay. Don't worry about it. Joseph enters. Again, they bow before him, as the dream predicted. And they offer the gift they had brought from Israel. Joseph inquires about their father, his father. How is he doing? And he's overwhelmed when he greets Benjamin, his brother. He hurries out of the room and he weeps. And he weeps loudly. He has to gather himself. They come back. They have a lavish meal all together. They have too much to drink. The text tells us they're merry. It's the same word used of Noah's drunkenness in Genesis 9. So they all eat good food, get drunk together, and the brothers depart the next day with their bags full of grain yet again. Chapter 44, Joseph continues to play games with the brothers because he can. He hides a silver cup in Benjamin's bag as the brothers return, making it seem like he is a thief. They discover it, they come back, and there's this really interesting thing that takes place in chapter 43. Judah convinces Israel that he will protect Benjamin. Judah steps in and says, if anything happens to him, take me. Not my kids, you take me. I will offer myself for his freedom. Does that sound familiar? I don't know, the gospel. I will offer myself so that he can go free. And it happens to be Judah who says such a thing. Jesus, who will come from his line, will say something much larger, not just for a brother, but for all of God's family who will come in. I will offer myself so they can go free. So when you read the text carefully, that kind of stuff begins to pop off the page. Like, oh, look at that. There's gospel hints all throughout the Old Testament, and there are. So they come back, the stolen cup, everything that's happening here. You know, are they thieves? Are they not thieves? Are they spies? Are they not spies? Genesis 45, verse 1. Then Joseph could not restrain himself before all those who stood by him, and he called out, have everyone go out from me. So there was no man with him when Joseph made himself known to his brothers. And then he wept loudly. And the Egyptians heard it, and the household of Pharaoh heard it. Then Joseph said to his brothers, I am Joseph. Is my father still alive? But his brothers could not answer him, for they were terrified at his presence. That's right, they are. Amen to that. Then Joseph said to his brothers, please come near me. And they came near, and he said, I am Joseph, your brother, whom you sold into Egypt. So now, let's stop reading. If you know the text, you know what's coming. It's all nice and rainbows and unicorns, but let's stop right here for a second. You're Joseph, and your brothers, out of jealousy, have betrayed you, tried to kill you. One talked him out of it, and instead they sold you into slavery. And you are then a slave, in prison under false charges, and after 13 years, do you then find freedom? Who's responsible for all that? The brothers. He was a slave because of the brothers. He finds himself in Potiphar's house because of the brothers. Yes, things are going well, and he's a good slave, but he's a slave because of his brothers. He comes under false accusation by Potiphar's wife, ultimately because of the brothers. He shouldn't have been there. He's only there because of the brothers. He's in prison, rotting under false charges because ultimately of the brothers. They did this to him on top of Potiphar's wife. All the ups and downs, the emotional roller coaster, all the trauma that happens internally and externally to him, living in the pit, as the text says it. And then Joseph is elevated to this incredible, unbelievable position of authority. The 7 years of plenty have gone by, 2 years into the famine, and there he stands, Lord of the land, with the exception of Pharaoh, the most powerful man in the world. And those brothers now stand before him. What would you do? Oh, I can dream of what I would do in that moment. None of it's positive. All of it's bad. I would abuse that power without a moment's hesitation. And don't think ill of me, because so would you. We're talking torture. We're talking jail time. Second for second of every second I've been in slavery and all the stuff I've had to go through, eye for an eye, tooth for a tooth. We're going to start quoting scripture, and it's going to be epic. And then I'm going to execute you with a smile on my face. That's normal for a reaction, don't you think? That would be reasonable. It'd be logical. Revenge, it's a good thing. In our culture, we just call it canceling, but it's the same thing. We would absolutely cancel those brothers, like from breathing. It's going to be epic for all of that. And here they stand, the dream fulfilled, and this moment with all the power in the world to do whatever he wants in that moment. Verse 5 of chapter 45. So now do not be grieved or angry with yourselves because you sold me here. For God sent me before you to preserve life. For the famine has been in the land these 2 years. There are still 5 years in which there will be neither plowing nor harvesting. So God sent me before you to establish for you a remnant in the earth and to keep you alive for a great remnant of survivors. So now it was not you who sent me here, but God. And he has set me as a father to Pharaoh and lord of all his household and ruler over all the land of Egypt. Hurry and go up to my father and say to him, thus says your son Joseph, God has set me as Lord of all Egypt. Come down to me, do not delay. You shall live in the land of Goshen. You shall be near me, you and your children and your children's children and your flocks and your herds and all that you have. There I will also provide for you, for there are still 5 years of famine to come, lest you and your household and all that you have be impoverished. And behold, your eyes see, and the eyes of my brother Benjamin see, that it is my mouth which is speaking to you. So you must tell my father of all my glory in Egypt and all that you have seen, and you must hurry and bring my father down here. Then he fell on his brother Benjamin's neck and wept, and Benjamin wept on his neck. He kissed all his brothers and wept on them, and afterwards his brothers talked with him. Isn't that incredible? I mean, so moving to be in that place to do whatever you want, and he doesn't. He refrains. He forgives. And who does he, even above his brothers, who does he blame for all that's happened? God. It's everywhere in the text, isn't it? Over and over and over again, Joseph says, my brothers didn't do this. God did this. My brothers are not sovereign over history. The God of the universe is sovereign over history. Potiphar's wife is not in charge of my prison time. God is in charge of prison time. He is the one who put me here, and I have to figure out what that is. And only now, after the fact, years after the fact, only then can he look back and reverse and go, I get it. All the struggle, all the frustration, all the ups and downs, all the darkness that he had to endure, we understand, right? The confusion, I don't know what God is up to. I'm trying to figure this out. I don't understand. And sometimes God gives that blessed, glorious gift of perspective. And now you can look back and go, oh, look at that. Well, how about that? That's neat. Look at what God did. Because now, because God put me here, and God orchestrated this and this and this and this and this and this and this, now I stand in the position that I have. Not only is Egypt saved, all of Israel is saved. So without God having set all that up, all the suffering, all the pain, all the hard times, if God hadn't done that, the nation of Israel dies before they even take off. These are his covenant people that before the foundation of the world, he had said they're mine. In Genesis 12, he had promised to Abraham, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to birth a nation and I'm going to bless them. Well, having them all killed off in a famine is not blessing. That's curse. So God orchestrates all of this through Joseph for the sake of saving the lives of all of God's people. Again, this is the hope held out in the gospel, is it not? We stand before the Lord, not just the Lord of the land, the Lord of the cosmos, guilty as charged for all that we've done, deserving not only of death, but of eternal condemnation. And there, with all the power in the world of all that God could do to you, he doesn't. And now forgives. Because of the work of Christ, he forgives, sets it all aside, and embraces as son and daughter. And we become brothers and sisters. That is the power of forgiveness, friends. Only forgiveness does that kind of stuff. Only forgiveness creates that kind of goodness in the world. Over and again, Joseph will lay out, God's done this, God has done this, and because of that, I can forgive. Now, they're accountable for what they've done, absolutely. Potiphar's wife's accountable for what she's done, absolutely. But over and above it all, God has used all of those things. And now I can forgive because God has used this for his glory and his purposes in the world. At the end of Genesis, in chapter 50, in the very last chapter, Joseph will revisit this very idea. The family comes. There's a lot of them, 70, come down. The nation of Israel is quite small at this point. They all come down, and Jacob is there, Israel, and he's reunited with his son that he's thought was dead for 21 years. Ugh, that's a long time. 22 years. Yeah, 2 years of the famine. So it had been 22 years now that he's thought his son was dead. Can you imagine that reunion? He's there with his dad, and they all have their children together and grandchildren together, and Israel blesses all the sons, and you can read about that in the final chapters of Genesis. And then Jacob dies. Israel dies. And the brothers have an understandable reaction. Dad's dead. Now he's going to kill us. He didn't kill us when we thought he was going to kill us because Dad would have been mad. So now Dad can't get mad. So now we're now living in the land of Egypt. He's just going to execute us. It's over. A reasonable, understandable reaction. Chapter 50, verse 15. Then Joseph's brothers saw that their father was dead, and they said, "What if Joseph bears a grudge against us and returns back to us all the evil which we dealt against him?" So they sent a message to Joseph saying, "Your father commanded before he died, saying, 'Thus you shall say to Joseph, please forgive, I beg you, the transgression of your brothers and their sin, for they dealt evil against you.'" Remember how they said they were honest men? Liars. They're not honest men. They're lying through their teeth yet again. "So now please forgive the transgression of the slaves of the God of your father." And Joseph wept when they spoke to him. Then his brothers also came and fell down before him again and said, "Behold, we are your slaves." But Joseph said to them, "Do not be afraid, for am I in God's place? As for you, you meant evil against me, but God meant it for good, in order to do what has happened on this day, to keep many people alive." So you see the tough to reconcile both sides. You meant this for evil. You are accountable. You are responsible. But God intended this for good. God superimposes his will even over the top of your evil, because God can do that and use even these evil things to accomplish this. Israel is now alive. Yes, sir?
What part did Benjamin play in this latter part of this?
Nothing.
He excluded, didn't he?
No, he's going to be in all of this. Now, he wouldn't have been afraid of Joseph killing him. Yeah, he wouldn't have been afraid of that at all. So he's just an observer of all of this, wondering if all this is going to go down. I would wonder it too. But if I'm him, while
It's safe if I'm him.
oh yeah, so if I'm in that room and these brothers coming and they say, "Hey, Dad commanded this," totally untrue. "Hey, forgive, he's going to kill us." If I'm Benjamin, I'm up with Joseph with my arm around him. Like, "Yeah, that's right. What do you think we should do to them?" Because I'm not part of that. So if you're going to take off their heads, fine. Remember how close we are? Remember Mom? Huh? Yeah, she loved us both dearly. Yeah. I would be working that any chance I got. So he's not living in fear. It's the 10 brothers, and they are scared to death. And they should be. But the one that they wronged is the very one who consoles them. Jesus, the one we've sinned against, is the very one who comes alongside and consoles, removes the guilt, empowers us to live better for him. Israel is now alive and well. It's small. Israel, as a people, go in, 70-ish people go into Egypt. And over time, as we'll see in the book of Exodus, Pharaoh dies, another Pharaoh rises, and God has blessed Israel so well. They are rapidly reproducing. And when they leave Egypt, after 430 years of slavery, millions walk out of Egypt. 70 walk in, millions walk out, and they walk out with all the wealth of Egypt. All that God has orchestrated has set up now what's going to happen in the book of Exodus, which is the theme of God's activity for the next 2,000 years until Jesus steps foot on the earth. God knows what he's doing. If there's anything you take away from the book of Genesis, God knows exactly what he's doing. So sleep well. Rest well. Charles Spurgeon said, "The sovereignty of God is the pillow on which the believer rests his head at night." The fact that God rules and reigns over all things is the reason you can sleep soundly tonight, no matter what's happening in your life and in the world. Amen, and God bless to that. 1, 2, 3, go team.